Moving from exercise into nutrition, we saw questions come through that different diets are being talked about and they aren't sure which one they should follow. So
Peter Attia tells us his 5 tactics to improve longevity.
do you want to quickly walk through the tactics in your longevity toolkit, and then from there we can go into detail on each of them?
Yeah, I mean, I think broadly speaking, there are 5 buckets of things that we have control over to impact all of these things we're talking about. So one, we just talked about, exercise. And you can probably tell my bias is that that's the single most important one.
Okay, I disagree with that. I would say that that's the second most important, really, maybe even third, actually. I'm not anti-exercise, don't get me wrong. I'm not really a fan of the people that are completely anti-exercise. I sympathize with them a bit. I share very many sentiments with them, but I think the primary one is diet. Also, whenever we talk about exercise, you have to clarify. It's prudent to clarify what type of exercise we're talking about, because depending on the exercise you're talking about, it's important to eliminate it entirely from your regimen. There is no such thing. It is not true that there is no such thing as bad exercise.
The most part. So the second, in no particular order, would be nutrition. So what you eat.
Okay, see, that would be first. That is the most intimate impacts on your genes, and so it has the most intimate and direct effects on heart health outcomes and presentation.
Matters. And we'll talk about that, I'm sure, in more detail. The third one would be sleep. So,
okay, very important. Sleep is essential. Quality of sleep is very, very, very important. So good. Yep.
You know, the difference between sleeping well and not sleeping well has an enormous impact on your brain, but also on your metabolic health, which then indirectly plays a great role in other diseases. The fourth would be all of the sort of medications and supplements, drugs, anything that your doctor prescribes or that you can buy over the counter.
What? Peter? No, you want to get rid of those, and you want to eliminate your dependence on them. You want to reduce it to the point of elimination. And same goes for supplements, by the way. Supplement means you're missing something. That's not good. Did we evolve supplementing things? Or did we just acquire everything that was necessary for our lives, and not just for our lives, but for the thriving of our lives, for the flourishing of our lives, from food? Proper genotypically adapted food. The food that we are genotypically adapted to. Anyway.
And these are of, varying degrees of efficacy. Some of them are incredibly dubious. Some of them can be life-saving. But again, all of those things we'd want to think about.
So he's saying think about them. So he's not saying that you should be prioritizing them. It's things that you can control. Okay. See, this is why I react to the entirety of a video. But I also keep my initially perceived understanding of what the other person is saying in here. So anyway.
And then the final bucket would be kind of all the tools that we would have at our disposal to improve our emotional health and well-being.
So we've already touched a little bit about why exercise is important, but for people in this audience, how can they start to safely exercise while also managing physical limitations?
It's hard to provide kind of a blanket statement on that because everybody's going to be different.
Well, everyone is going to be different because there's biodiversity. It's why you and I look different, Peter. Genotype and phenotype play a role in that respect. However, we are the same species. So when it comes to what is indicated for our speciation, that's pretty much going to be constant with very minimal variability across the genome.
But I think it's safe to say that people are less fragile than they believe. And
correct. typically.
I meet many people, for example, who have back injuries and say, look, I have a back injury. I can't really do anything. And the reality of it is when you sort of probe a little bit further, what you realize is nothing tends to make their back hurt more than inactivity.
Okay, see, yes, this is a very interesting paradox that I don't have as much vehement disagreement with. I have more fascinating conversation and interesting conversations as opposed to being very convicting about my positions on this topic, because I'm someone that has also experienced this as well. I am someone that still continues to suffer from hypermobile EDS, but I will be eventually making a full recovery. I'm on my way. Every single treatment that I get, I am miles better than when I was before. My baseline increases to an exponential degree afterwards, an exorbitant degree afterwards. So I know firsthand that I was someone, as a result of being inculcated throughout my entire life with a strong work ethic, to a fault, actually, to the point where even when I shouldn't have been working, I still pushed through and did so because I was afraid of social ostracization. Because you want to be an upstanding citizen and someone that is actually contributing to the general welfare of the public and all this stuff. Like, you want to, yeah. So there were times where I shouldn't have been doing that, and I did it anyway. So as a result of that, I couldn't get rid of that part of my brain. In fact, it just got worse. Now I'm constantly working on whatever it is, doing everything all the time. But as a result of that, I didn't feel comfortable with me still not engaging in exercise. I felt like a weakling. I felt, like mentally and spiritually weak. And so I actually forced myself one day to go ahead and go through with it. And I was debilitated. I couldn't even walk. I used an X3 bar, which is supposed to underload your joints, and it still left me in the floor. But I said, you know what? All right, that was bad. I'm going to try it for 1 week. Though, like 1 to 2 weeks, because I'll put a rest day or two in there, like, and I'm going to see how I feel, if I feel better or if I feel worse, because sometimes before you get better, you can get worse first. And eventually what happened is I did get more resilient. I did get stronger. I was not left in the floor anymore. And so eventually I continued for months to exercise. But what I ended up doing was I did stop eventually. And I lost my gains, but I never went back to the previous baseline, by the way. It's very interesting. Never, even to this day. And I did so comfortably because now I established to myself that, okay, I can do this. Let me just give it some more time, though, because it was hurting very badly. Month after month after month, it was still hurting. It just was nowhere near the degree that it hurt originally. I thought I was doing myself a favor, but after evaluating further, I said, okay, the cons are outweighing the pros here. And so at some point, I'm going to be getting back into it. I tried again very recently, and I felt way better exercising after exercising than I did whenever I first stopped again about a year ago. But I'm still not quite there yet. Like, I felt miles better, but still not to the point where I'm comfortable doing it. So, he's right, but also the reason I say it's a paradox is because it depends highly on the person. Sometimes you are actually, they would be better off not doing any exercise. And that's why what elicited this from me was he was like, oh, one of the things that'll hurt the most is inactivity. Because what was happening was that was actually the case with me. That's why whenever I exercised, it left me in the floor. But after I gained strength again, my resting pain level was actually decreasing a bit. But in order to maintain that, I was actually having a net increase in pain and damage. Then I was actually having the opposite. So I stopped. But anyway, it's temporary. Patience is a virtue. So, okay, very nuanced topic, very nuanced area.
I don't remember who made the statement, but I loved it, and I've paraphrased it or plagiarized it many times. Sitting is to lower back pain what bourbon is to alcoholism. So, and I think any of you...
Again, I covered the nuance here. I would prefer some more recognition of the nuance, but fine.
back has hurt will probably think about that and go, he's kind of right. Like, when my back hurts, sitting is the one thing I don't like to do, or after a long drive, it hurts worse. And for most people, actually being active makes them feel better. Now, let's be clear. There are certain activities, like if you have no cartilage left in your knee, more walking won't make you feel better. And so you're going to have to see an orthopedic surgeon. They might need to do a knee replacement. But boy, I will tell you, in this day and age, in 2025, what can be done with a knee replacement, a hip replacement, even a shoulder replacement? I mean, these operations have come along so far, and they have restored so much quality of life to individuals. So every one of these cases has to be managed individually, but if you have a really good PT or rehab professional who knows what's fixable with more training or more conditioning versus, hey, this actually does need some medical attention, I think the aspiration should be, what can I do to get as active as possible?
Okay, so basically, I agree with all of that. Again, little more nuance there, especially that I would prefer to be covered, like, for example, the type of exercise that we're talking about. I believe that Peter is a fan of Zone 2 training. That's like the last bit of training that you want to be doing. Again, what is ancestrally consistent and all that good stuff. Yeah, I mean, generally, everything that he said, I agree with. I'm glad that he finally addressed it. It's highly individual, actually. Something that he mentioned, the example he mentioned was if you have no cartilage left in your knee, walking is not going to make you feel better. Well, yeah. Something else that I want to add is that if you have serious tendon problems and ligament problems in terms of like as a result of EDS or certain joint levels of joint instability that don't particularly attain the level of EDS, but still sort of are a microcosmic level of it, what I would say is you'll, in very many cases, if not invariably, damage your joints further, especially with static weights. And that doesn't just mean joints, I also mean tendons. Okay, your tendons can weaken over time, especially if your muscles are overstrained in order to try and stabilize a joint because the ligaments aren't doing their job right. And over time, they will get weaker and weaker until you can get very, very, very tight muscles that actually are very weak, okay? Because in order to get a strong muscle, it's not just tightening the muscle or flexing it. You have to load the muscle. You can't just flex the muscle all the time, which is why you need to lift heavy. You can't lift light, but do many reps. Like, that's not how that works. So that is a problem. You can actually worsen tendons that way because tendons, I mean, for people that don't understand, if you've got like a ligament, a tendon, and a muscle, and don't even think of ligament, just think of the overall joint for this analogy. And not analogy, just explanation. Whenever your muscle produces energy and actually produces it contracts. Tendons are what transmit that force from the muscle to the bone, really, to move. Okay, the tendons are like the linking sort of gear there. And what can happen is if you've got a super unstable bone because of an unstable joint or something, then muscles are going to be chronically tight, and therefore the tendon is going to be overstrained. Until eventually you will actually start to weaken the tendon to the point where if the muscle flexes any more than a certain level, then the tendon can actually just be detached entirely from the bone. And so what can happen is that the muscle will start to, the force of the muscle that it puts out, will start to decrease. So you'll have a chronically tight muscle, but it will be extremely weak. So not cool, not fun. And the last thing that you want to do is worsen that even more by over-exercising. So again, there is a nuance that needs to be covered. However, the amount of nuance that needs to be covered would be too much to even fit within this little talk. So I'm also going to be forgiving there because you can only talk about so much whenever you're on stage. So anyway.
Moving from exercise into nutrition, we saw a question through that different diets are being talked about and they aren't sure which one they should follow. So is there a diet that you think is best, or does it depend on the individual?
Okay.
I don't think there's a diet that is best. I think there.
Peter! Last I checked, humans are a species of animal, that species being Homo sapiens sapien, and last I checked, every single animal on the face of this planet has one diet for its speciation. And before people say, well, humans are different, well, yes and no. We're different in many ways. We're also the same in many ways. We are an animal. Or on a material level, we're actually very much the same as other animals, with the obvious different distinctions because we're different species, obviously. So no. In terms of what we ought to eat, it's very clear, and I'm sure that we'll get into it.
Principles that matter, and everyone should find the diet that.
Yeah, there are principles that matter, and those are the Darwinian principles of evolution and the subsequent principles of indication in the human diet.
Allows them to adhere to the principles. So,
okay, well, what if someone can best adhere to their principles by eating Twinkies and Ding Dongs every day? Is that a good idea, Peter? Okay, I'm having too much fun here. Get out!
What are the principles? The principles are not to eat too much and not to eat too little.
Those are the principles, Peter. Really? That's it. That's f***ing it. Oh. Not to mention that even if they were, does that not necessarily implicate quality of food? Because doesn't the quality of the food, the actual constituents of your food, influence your desire to eat more or eat less? Peter, I don't understand. Goodness me. Peter, I don't like this. Peter, I don't like this.
That sounds dumb, but it's just the reality of it.
Well, no, it's not the reality. It's your opinion. And it's inane, in my opinion. See that? Lots of opinions in the world, aren't there? What are your opinions based on, though, Peter? And that can help us approximate what opinion is grounded on the most robust evidence and the strongest signals and the minimization of noise, the least amount of noise, in other words.
And I think everyone struggles with a different end of that spectrum, right? There are some people who...
Why is that, Peter? Why do they struggle with it? Could it be because of what they're eating? I don't know.
Don't like to eat that much. They're like little birds. And as they get older...
Yeah, and why is that? Why is that? Could that have any implication? Could that provide any implication about what they're eating?
That becomes a huge problem. They are too frail. At the other end of the spectrum...
Right, so what are they eating, Peter? That influences how much people want to eat of the food. I feel like that's obvious. I feel like that's obvious.
People like me who like to eat too much, and we will spend most of our life...
Good luck eating too much on a species-appropriate, species-specific diet for human beings. Can you guess, if you're a new viewer, what that diet is? Stay tuned to the end of the video, or later in the video, for me to tell you. Or you can buy my book, Contrainidicated, a closer look and revision of mainstream health axioms that have perpetuated illness, disorder, and disease for over a century, if you've not bought this book already. Second edition is out now. Link in the description below for paperback, hardcover, and ebook, and self-narrated audiobook editions, because I am all about authenticity, absolutely.
fighting against the urge to eat too much. And that also becomes a problem as you get older.
Why are you fighting the urge? Because let me tell you, if you're eating a species-appropriate, species-specific diet, good luck fighting that urge. Or what? Good luck having the urge to begin with. That was my point.
Because the heavier you are, the more weight you're putting on each and every one of those joints. And again,
true.
We're thinking about all these things that are working against us as we age, not to mention other complications that come from eating too much.
Too much what, Peter? So eating too much of literally anything has the same effects on your physiology then? Eating too much of anything is a bad thing, absolutely. But once again, what's the most conducive way of eating too much? Too much being beyond what you are evolved to withstand according to your appetite and your hunger signaling. Which actually is also nuanced, because if your hunger signaling and your appetite signals are deranged because of what you've been eating, because it's incongruent with what you're designed to eat, then you also have another problem. Which is why I keep asking Peter, why do these people tend to want to eat too little or too much? Why?
But I would say that in an aging population, the most important thing I want to emphasize is getting enough protein.
Yep. There's plenty of protein that is in its most bioavailable forms in a species-appropriate, species-specific diet for Homo sapiens sapien. So, there you go.
First of all, I just think for many people, it's kind of hard to get enough protein in. Even
why is that, Peter? It's not hard for me to get protein in. Is it difficult for you? It doesn't seem so. You look fit. You look healthy. Looks can be deceiving. Anyway, whatever. Yeah, I mean, why is it difficult for you to get protein in? Or, sorry, it's not difficult for me to get protein in. Why do you think that is?
I have to pay attention to it, and I don't have a problem eating. But
also, hold on a minute. Define enough, Peter? What's your definition that you're using for enough? Is it based on arbitrary metrics that are completely noisy and based on human nutrition science data, which isn't science at all, but theology, and based on false premises, like a sampling distribution, and statistical significance and confidence intervals? Is that what you're looking at, Peter?
Be mindful of, hey, did I get enough protein? It's really easy for me to get all the carbs in the world.
Well, there you go. Get out! Peter, seriously? So you're going to sit here and you're going to acknowledge that carbs are the most likely to get you to binge, almost in a way that I perceive is implied to mean like, oh, well, I make sure to get my carbs in, like as if you need them, which is silly. But anyway, seriously?
It's not, I don't have to go out of my way to eat more fat, but I do have to be.
Okay, well, there's something. However, Peter, good luck eating as much fat as you can carbs. Depends on what the fat is paired with. If it's paired with carbs, then you'll have no problem. So it's a variable in and of itself. You get carbs, fats, and then you got carbs and fats together. That's actually a separate variable. It's a third variable.
Isn't of getting enough protein, and enough protein is a pretty big number, right?
Really? So for every single person? Enough protein is how much you have an appetite for, Peter, unless your appetite is deranged, in which case you can work with a coach on that. That figure, if you're super deranged, the best approximation I can see is 1.75 grams per kilogram of lean body mass. Lean body mass being very, very, very roughly calculated by taking your height in meters squared and multiplying it by 22.5, which is considered quote-unquote the optimal BMI. So again, based on ridiculousness. But again, you're going to look for the strongest signal in that sphere because you've deranged your appetite signaling and your hunger signaling. Well, got to work with what you can work with. So, yeah. Anyway. It's actually less than some people will tell you. And even then, the best way of doing that is by eating a carnivore diet. Oh, drop the ball. Oh, cat's out of the bag. Our species-appropriate, species-specific diet. Peter.
It's about 1 gram per pound of body weight.
You can get away with a little less, but okay, fine.
So,
is that really that? Peter, seriously? That's a ton? It's not that hard to get that protein in, Peter. If you have a really big problem with it, you can still get away with it on carnivore by eating shrimp, chicken breast. It's not that difficult. It may be difficult for some, and I don't want to discredit them. But I can do that today as someone who doesn't engage in any exercise at all at the moment. And haven't for months.
I would challenge each of you to pay attention to, hey, if you weigh 150 pounds, are you getting 150 grams of protein a day? And I would...
Peter, so hold on a second. Every single person has that requirement? Irrespective of their training status and their activity level? This is what I'm saying. Appetite is your strongest inference as to how much protein you ought to be consuming. Duh. I don't understand.
I would bet that especially for the women here, that's even harder. Now, if you fall a little bit short of that, it's okay. But if you're at half of that, you're really not getting the optimal amount of protein. And
right, but wouldn't that be reflected in their appetite? And what they're gravitating towards in terms of food? Because a lot of times, if you have an appetite for protein, but you don't have protein around because you don't buy it, because you're not realizing what you're eating, you're just eating a bunch of junk, well, then you actually gravitate towards eating other things because your body's trying to compensate. So, anyway. Continue!
We age, we develop something called anabolic resistance, which means...
Every single person all across the board? Really? Let's hear what he actually has to say about what this is in the first place.
That it is harder and harder for our muscles to synthesize and grow new muscle cells with the given amount of amino acids, which are the building blocks in protein that we...
And what's the mechanism there, Peter? I mean, it could be true because as you age, your rate of cell division slows down for obvious reasons. Your telomeres shrink. That's obviously, telomeres are the certain number of base pairs on DNA that, prevent the DNA from fraying in the first place and disintegrating, causing the cells to disintegrate and all that. But they shorten every time a cell divides through mitosis. And so as you get older, they shorten and shorten and shorten and shorten and shorten and until they're gone. But I mean, if you're curious on how to actually replace cells with full-length telomeres, though, you do have an ability to do that yourself. You release stem cells from your bone marrow, CD34 plus stem cells, that do exactly that. They differentiate into any cell in the body, or they have the capacity to do so at the very least, except for sperm or egg cells. But the rate at which they are released slows down as you age as well. So if you want to return that rate back to what it was before, keeping in mind that these cells are actually part of an immortal cell line. So even though you increase the rate, you're not like getting closer and closer to completely eliminating all the cells from your bone marrow. That's just not how that works. Well, then I would recommend referring to the link at the top right corner of the screen about a product by the name of Stem Enhance Ultra from a great company, a very, very good company known as Cerule. I haven't promoted them in a while, but I'm doing it now because I still take it every single day. Stem Enhance Ultra it is clinically proven to show that they are directly involved in the release, increasing the rate of adult stem cell, CD34 plus adult stem cell release from your bone marrow. I've seen the studies. one study in particular, it's pretty convincing, even with all of the limitations involved in that science. It's rare that you see that a signal that strong with all the limitations of that science that I lament consistently in my public material, because it's really what you're looking for, a very strong signal. So just something to consider. But yeah, so anabolic resistance. I mean, perhaps that's true. However, I would find it hard. I find it hard to believe, Peter, that your cells dividing slower and slower at a lesser rate is going to be the reason for anabolic resistance, if that even exists. Was this inferred from a population of people that were eating a specific way? I mean, seriously, I'd love to see the science that supports that claim.
By eating protein, and therefore we actually need more and more protein to overcome that.
Really? Well, wouldn't that be reflected in the appetite of the animal? Anyway, okay.
So, we talk a lot about obesity. We talk a lot about osteoporosis and osteopenia, but there's another condition of aging called sarcopenia.
Yes, lack of muscle. Sufficient muscle. It's a problem.
Which is the condition of muscle loss, and that's a
right. So yes, that can happen as you age. But what I'm saying is the whole anabolic resistance thing. Is it the case that that will happen if you were eating sufficient protein according to your appetite? Because what you seem to suggest is that you need more and more protein beyond your appetite as you age. That's not necessarily true. Right? Like, again. This is less offensive of a viewpoint, if I'm being extremely honest. But, at least he's not saying things like, oh, you need more carbs as you age or something. Like, anyway.
Huge problem. And there's really two ways to, in concert, two ways to address that. One is consuming enough protein, and the other is doing enough resistance training.
Yes. Good, Peter. Good stuff.
Again, doesn't matter if you're a vegetarian, doesn't matter if you like.
Whoa! Huh? Doesn't matter if you're a vegetarian? It definitely does matter, Peter.
Mediterranean diet, doesn't matter if you like steak and.
Doesn't matter if you like steak and eggs.
Potatoes.
And potatoes. Oh, replace those potatoes with eggs.
You can adhere to those principles. That's going to make your life easier. Is it harder to adhere to those principles if you're a vegan? Yeah, it's a lot harder, but it's not impossible.
It's not impossible, but what you need to look at and assess is what is indicated for your physiology as a human being and what isn't. It's that simple. Okay, people could, it's like when these people focus on weight as being like the sole criterion of health. Like, oh, there's many things that you can do to lose weight. Choose what works for you. It's like, that's based on a premise that health, the only criterion of health is weight. Which, by the way, it's really broad. There's that problem. But then also, there's a subsequent problem, which is, well, what is that weight made up of? So any weight whatsoever? Any of it? So if I chop my arm off, I will have lost weight in the form of fat, muscle, and water, and bone density. I will have also done it without using dietary intervention. So was that good? It's like, well, no, but we're talking about in the confines of diet. It's like, that's not the point. You acknowledge that there are ways that are good to do it and there are ways that are bad to do it, right? In other words, indicated or contraindicated. So anyway.
Lots of people who have done it. But, looking at a food tracking app in your phone is a great way to spend a week evaluating how many grams of protein you're getting. And I think
it can be, yes, fair enough, but that's not sustainable. I thought he was going to say something about calories. Then we would have had a serious problem. But okay, yeah, sure, but it's not sustainable to be doing that all the time. Maybe like acutely, temporarily, sure. Sometimes I feel like you would only need like a few days of doing that. Because then you get an idea like, oh, okay, now I have an idea of how much protein I'm eating regularly. Now I know how much I need to step it up. So.
be surprised that for many of us, we're probably underdoing it.
Now moving on to sleep. Sleep is something that you've written a lot about, and you said that you didn't used to take it very seriously, but now you do take it very seriously, and that's true. He goes to bed at like 8 every night. So why do you think it's so important?
I think I'm up till 9 these days. Yes.
He's better than me. I used to be like that. I don't do that anymore. I need to. I'm falling asleep at about 11 o'clock at night. Still getting up early, though. Would you consider 8 a.m. early?
Sleep is important, and you're right. I used to, probably until 12 years ago, I think my mantra was, I'll sleep when I'm dead, and I, just would try to sleep as little as possible.
Yeah, I've never been like that ever. And I'm glad that I've never been like that. The only thing that stops my working is my need for sleep and my actual fear of staying up and getting too little sleep. I have an actual fear. That's very, very, very deeply rooted, though. I'm not going to get into that.
But the evidence are pretty overwhelming, especially for both near-term and long-term function of the brain, that sleep is very important.
Okay, so here is where I really need to make the main distinction and the main conflict here with this entire video, okay? It's not the conclusions. The conclusions, overwhelmingly, not 100%, but overwhelmingly I'm agreeing with. It's the way in which this person is arriving at the conclusions. It is based on a completely different framework. He is employing and referencing human nutrition science, and not just nutrition science, but just human-based evidence. So this has to do with sleep, right? But it's the same science itself. It just pertains to a different element of human health. It's health science, right? That is not science. At all. No matter how many people want to wish it to be science, it's not. It is extremely noisy. Okay? It's noisy because you cannot control for human beings. You can control for more confounders in certain studies than you can in other studies, but it doesn't mean that you can really control for anything of any utility. Or doesn't mean that you can control to a degree that would make the results that are yielded anything of any utility. Okay? You can't. I am looking at this from an ancestrally consistent point of view. In the wild, we went to sleep when we were tired. Then we woke up whenever we woke up. Okay? There is a very, very, very important distinction to make, though, and there's a very key point of nuance, which I've covered in a video called Modern Life is an Experiment. I'll refer to that in the top right corner of the screen, which is that this doesn't mean that anything that we did in the wild is appropriate to be doing today, particularly in the realm of morality and like society, which didn't exist back then, and barbarism. Okay. That is something that you need to sublimate into something else that's more productive and more conducive to the flourishing of the human race. Okay. Duh. Like controlling your own behavior. Okay. Because you can extrapolate this logic to like, I don't know, emotions. Like, oh, well, if I'm angry, tens of thousands of years ago, if someone was angry, they would just punch something in front of them. If someone was angry at someone, they would just kill them. Therefore, we should do it today. Like, you see how it can just go right off the rails real quickly? This is why I mainly focus on the effects of things that don't pertain to like the immaterial aspects of life, but the material aspect. Emotions are sort of immaterial, right? You can sort of say that they're material in a way because, oh, well, we can monitor brain activity and see that there's neurochemistry going on and all this stuff. It's like, yeah, that doesn't really account for everything, though. In fact, scientists and the theologians, they're always at button heads a lot of times because they don't know the answers to these questions unequivocally. Like, they really don't know. One of the major arguments for religious truth, whatever religion it may be, is the distinction between material and immaterial phenomena and experiences, really. Like this table in front of me is material. Like we can actually observe it. We can get microscopic until you get to the quantum realm and actually things become a lot. There's a lot of confusion there and convoluted things and arbitrary activity and unpredictable activity. and everything starts to uncouple and unravel and drives scientists into an existential crisis. But anyway, putting that aside, you got the material, and then you've got things like emotions that are immaterial. Okay, so if we're going to make that distinction, I focus mainly on the material, like food, right? Sleep, because really we're talking about rest. Like we're actually talking about a metabolic phenomenon. Okay, sleep. So I mainly apply it to those things. Because when it comes to things like emotions and culture and all that behavior, like human behavior and the ability to reason, that's not the same thing. Like, oh, well, back in the day, we murdered people. Back in the day, we didn't have society, so therefore we shouldn't have society today. Like, nah. You see how things get a little complicated, which is also why I made that video, because it even sort of bleeds into the material realm. I mean, look at me. I have these artificial lights in front of me, these blue lights, and I'm looking at a camera, and I've got a monitor here. I've got headphones in my ears. You got Wi-Fi around me. Like there's a lot of things there's a lot of nuance that needs to be discussed. But the major thing, the main fallback point that I have is when it comes to carnivore, food in general, that has the most intimate effects on your genes. It does. Like, that's 100% true. Why wouldn't it? You're actually putting something inside your body in a large quantity. So, yeah, even if you don't want to listen to anything else, like lifestyle, like I don't care about sunlight, I don't care about blah, 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 I care about food that I eat. It's like, okay, well, I disagree. I think you should care a lot more about all the other stuff, but even if you're going to believe in just diet, okay, well, what did we most evolve to withstand the consumption of? Meat and animal products. But anyway, yeah, so the main point is the conclusions he's arriving at, like what he's talking about sleep now. Okay, yes, but it just makes sense to go to sleep when you're tired and wake up when you're waking up. It's obvious to me. The only time that these things become more nuanced is whenever there's actually a negative effect of doing so that's clearly observed. Okay, like you have to weigh out, using our ability to reason, we need to weigh pros and cons. That's actually the main premise of the Modern Life as an Experiment video. What are the pros and what are the cons that are clearly observed? Which again, pros and cons, those are also highly subjective. So really it's natural selection, isn't it? But not on the material realm, but now in the ideological realm. Ideas follow the Darwinian principles of evolution as well. Natural selection. Which ones prevail? Which ones are the fittest, right? The fittest. It comes down to, okay, if you've got 10 people, let's say, or well, I mean, the amount of people that we have on Earth, billions of people, if all of them think about what we should be doing, like, okay, this isn't congruous or congruent with what we evolved to withstand. We didn't experience this, okay, regularly. So therefore, we're risking things because anything that we've evolved to do, if we deviate too strongly or even just slightly away, there's a risk to that poses to the organism. Okay, but are the risks, in other words, the cons, worth sacrificing for, or worth sacrificing for the perceived pros? And I say perceived pros. This is when it gets into what I'm talking about with Darwinian evolution when it comes to ideas, because some people might say no, some people might say yes, and then it's put into practice through trial and error, and then we see what works and what doesn't. Perceived pros influence whether people will say yes or no, because some people might say something is a pro to a certain new behavior when other people will say no, it's not. What's a good example of that? Technology. Oh, well, technology is going to help us connect with each other and communicate better and more efficiently and all this stuff. Technology's brought a lot of good to the world. I'm not anti-technology. I know there's a lot of people that are more, I guess, conservative-minded in that respect. Yeah, I'm not. I'm actually a huge fan of it, but it would be silly to believe that it hasn't brought us extreme problems, especially with tribalism, especially with just the paradox where the more information that you have available to you, the stupider people get. Like, there's a lot of problems there. And this is an example of natural selection. So anyway, they got philosophical. I know that people like Kevin from Hair Cafe will say, "Oh yeah, you're being tangential. You're being tangential," which is actually just it's a demonstration. It's actually a evincing, I suppose you could say, of the lack of sophistication in his mind. That's really what it is. When people say that, they don't actually realize the connection. And just because you don't realize it doesn't mean that it's, doesn't mean you're stupid. And it doesn't mean that I'm wrong. Okay, this is the importance of leaning forward instead of leaning backward when you hear new ideas. I know, might sound ironic coming from me, but trust me, a lot of this is just persona. You can actually see that in many videos whenever I cut the act and I go, okay, listen, let's listen. Let's really talk about this because I know I'm saying all this, but here's how I really feel. But even then, even with the act, I steel man every single argument. You can see that in every video I do as well, with the possible exception of my very early videos. Have fun looking through those.
Now, I think at your age, a couple of unique challenges emerge. I think most people, once they're over 65 or 70, they're not fighting the will to sleep because they want to be out partying all night. It's more that other things are getting in the way, right? So we know that as a person ages, they tend to sleep a little bit lighter, and their sleep architecture tends to change a little bit.
That's true. If anyone has known anyone that's old, that's a fact. My grandmother sleeps for about 4 hours every night. She's actually been like that her whole entire life, though. So
we also know that other things get in the way, especially for men, which is it gets harder and harder to make it through a night without having to get up to pee. And I'm already at that stage where at least 2 out of the 7 nights a week, if I am not mindful about when I had my last glass of water, I'm going to be up at 2 or 3 in the morning to pee. And sometimes that's harder to go back to bed after. So, what are the things that we have under our control? Well, one of them is absolutely timing of water. Now, again, water is super important.
Drink when thirsty. Stop whenever you're satisfied.
Older a person gets, the more susceptible they are to dehydration. The older a person gets, the less reliable thirst is as an indicator for fluid status. So
why is that? What's the mechanism there, Peter?
At Olivia's age, you don't really, believe it or not, need to pay attention to how much you're drinking. Thirst will be the guide. But
okay, so why is that not the guide whenever you're older? Is there something that just starts malfunctioning whenever you're older? I don't understand that. What's the evidence to support that claim, Peter?
Less and less true as you age. So you're juggling a narrow problem, which is on the one hand,
what would have been the evolutionary reason for that? I mean, in theory, it would be a negative selection pressure that would be imposed because overhydration is a real thing. However, negative selection pressures only happen whenever they interfere with the survival of an organism. And not just interfere with the survival of the organism, but the survival of the organism to reproductive age. So to be fair, I mean, technically, you could say, well, we're living longer, and so it doesn't matter if that existed and interfered with the survival of an organism because, well, they reproduced, right? But it just doesn't seem right. I'd like to know the mechanism. Listen, I'm willing to accept things if there's sufficient evidence to support the claim, but I'm very jaded against the science because I understand all the flaws in it. So, like, what is your evidence to support that claim?
You have to be mindful about drinking enough, but on the other hand, you can't drink too much too close to bed, and that's going to keep you awake. Another thing that makes a huge difference in sleep quality is timing of food. So the longer you can have between when you have dinner and when you go to bed, the better. So we
eat when hungry, stop when full.
Really early because we have young kids in our house, and that's why I can get away with going to bed at 9 because it's still been 3.5 hours or 3 hours since I ate. Another thing is alcohol. So some of you probably drink alcohol.
Don't drink alcohol at all. There you go. I think that's pretty easy. I think we got it.
And the less alcohol you have in your system when you sleep, the better you're going to sleep.
Or when you're not sleeping, actually, the better you're going to live.
Having a super dark room, having a super cold room is going to make a big difference. And
I agree with that. You know, usually whenever it's nighttime, it's supposed to be dark. It's supposed to be dark. And it was typically colder as well.
Perhaps the biggest thing to sort of make a point about here is consistency of timing, especially on the wake up. So if you could tether yourself to one time, it's what time do I wake up? And if you force yourself to wake up at the same time every day and don't allow yourself to take a nap during the day, and this is a big ask because I know naps can be tempting, it's going to regulate when you end up going to bed.
Well, absolutely. Yes. This is pretty easy stuff, man. I mean, this is really simple.
Building up enough sleep pressure. So if a person tells me I'm struggling to sleep at night and I find out they're napping during the day, the first thing I want to do is get rid of the nap. Right? I want them to, and then I want to fix the wake up time, eliminate the nap, and then actually let them get into a better sleep cycle that way.
Are there any good sleep supplements that you recommend taking and that are like not damaging to you?
I suppose that this question is only relevant to someone that's having difficulty sleeping, even whenever they're living the most indicated lifestyle that we know of, from every hard inference that we have that can provide that evidence with very minimal noise. In which case, then we can start getting into that. I know that magnesium is a big one because magnesium competes with calcium at the myosin binding sites of actin filaments and muscle fibers. That relaxes you necessarily. Magnesium does more than that, but
yeah, there are. I mean, and I think one has to be very careful with this stuff. There's certainly evidence to suggest that as we age, melatonin levels go down, and therefore melatonin can aid, at least with sleep initiation. But it's important to know that melatonin really is only the signal to initiate sleep. It's not going to necessarily keep you asleep all night.
Right. So I wrote about this in my book as well because people think that melatonin is what makes you sleep. Or it's what makes you tired, which isn't exactly true. It's a hormone that signifies that it gets the body ready for sleep, but it's not exactly that. I mean, it's association doesn't equal causation, right? So actually, I'm pretty sure I wrote that in chapter 5 of my book. So yeah.
You're not doing all of the other things correctly, melatonin is going to be limited in its efficacy. So before I go down the route of supplements, I want to get everything we just talked about vis-a-vis the hygiene completely dialed in. And then, yeah, if there's still an issue falling asleep, I think melatonin can be a viable tool, although I'd really want to make sure it's the lowest dose you can buy. They tend to sell this stuff in high enough doses to kill horses. It's not necessary. You know, the lowest dose, which is maybe 300 micrograms, is probably all you need. At most, twice that dose, but you don't need anything north of a milligram. I think one has to experiment a little bit with other things. I find ashwagandha a little bit helpful. For others, maybe not so much.
Okay, and then we'll quickly touch on the last one, which is emotional health. And a lot of people think that this is not really something that kind of matters in longevity, but you talked about this in the last chapter of Outlive and how it's really important to you and that you've recently discovered it. So do you want to talk a little bit about that and how it's important as people are aging?
Well, I think it's actually important at any age.
Exactly. Yep. It's important at any stage of life.
I think that what I imagine is so appealing about living at a place like this is you have a built-in system of friendship, and I would imagine that that's probably a great source of well-being that many of your peers would be missing out on if they were living alone.
Here's one. Get off of social media, particularly X and Instagram. So it's social media and TikTok. And if you have Snapchat, what do you have Snapchat for? What do you have that for? I have it from my high school days, but I talked to about 5 people on there right now. Really nobody anymore because I am older. I still have it though. Yeah, that's not really. That's a communication platform. That's not a social media platform. Get off of social media. I think the most nefarious one, the worst one, is X. I am actually astonished at how much misinformation is on X. I cannot believe it. I should believe it. I should. But wow. On all sides, including any faction of any political side, any. Like if you're on the left, the people that are on your exact same side on X do you a disservice. People on the right, if you're in any faction on the right, anyone from your faction on X, they do you a disservice. It is a misrepresentation of it is misinformation from every single side of any political aisle on X. It is unbelievable. Wow. YouTube is probably your safest bet, but even then, you got to be careful. Get off X. Get off of it.
I think about how little I see my parents because we live in a different country. And so I can imagine that things that we take for granted when we're young, like being close to our children or our grandchildren, aren't guaranteed when we grow older. Now, of course, she's signed a contract that says she can't leave Austin, so this won't be a problem for me. But, I think...
So I presume that this person is his daughter?
A social support network and some sense of purpose might be the single most important part of the emotional health toolkit as it pertains to living longer. Every one of us knows the story of the couple that have been married for 70 years. One of them passes away, and then the other one dies within a year. I don't think these are just anecdotal. I really think there's an understanding of why that happens.
Yep. Got no problems there either.
Well, you can do everything right. You can eat the right diet. You can sleep right. You can exercise. But if your emotional health is lacking, then it's like you won't live as long.
Well, you can't draw that conclusion. You can say that there is now an influence on lowering lifespan ostensibly, even in spite of having all those other things at an appropriate level or something. You got to be very careful with making claims like that.
It's possible, but I would...
It's possible. There you go. So more responsible language from Peter. Quite impressed, actually.
Even more than that, regardless of how long you live, if it's unhappy, why bother? You know what I mean? Like so let's say you do live a long time, but you're alone or you're miserable. In some ways, that would be the ultimate purgatory.
Right. Okay. So also tend to agree. I would say that you still have a responsibility to take care of yourself, though. So I mean, it just can be harder. Okay. Well, so this is like the least offensive video I've ever reacted to. I feel like. So yeah. No, that was totally fine by me. I'm thoroughly impressed with that, actually. And I'm glad that finally got around to it. So, because this has been on my list for a while. Anyone that sends me videos, by the way, I want you all to know that I do absolutely add them to a list. When I say added to the list, they're added. Now, it doesn't mean that I will react to every single one, because some of them I evaluate and I go, I don't think that's a good one for me to react to. So it's not a guarantee. But they are on the list if and some of them I've added myself, but just so you know that. Eventually it's going to get to a point where I cannot add them all to the list, though. I'll try. Oh, well, I could probably add them all. Well, no. Eventually, no, it just will get to a point where I can't add them all to the list because I can't open every single email and every message. But I'm not to that point yet. So, anyway. Yeah, so my biggest problem was the diet thing. Again, the way in which he's drawing these conclusions is it's through human nutrition science, which isn't science. It's through it's through statistics in general, which there's lies, damned lies in statistics, as we know. So, but I think the diet thing was the biggest problem. Therefore, actually, we should be looking at it through a different lens. And understanding the nuance behind that lens, but still understanding that it's the best lens. It's far more superior than noisy data like statistics and all that stuff. So anyway, human nutrition science. So with that being said, if you enjoyed the video, leave a like, subscribe to me if you haven't already. If you haven't subscribed yet, I'm not really sure what you're doing at all. I don't think you know what you're doing, actually. Leave your thoughts in the comment section below. Buy my book, Contrainidicated, as well. A closer look and revision of mainstream health axioms that have perpetuated illness, disorder, and disease for over a century if you have not bought this book already. And also, finally, you know what? Finally, Cerule. Go ahead and check out the links in the description below for the Cerule products. I've done 2 specifically. This is a very, very, very good product. And it's really the only one that I recommend people take. And I mean that if you're older than 18, take the product. I recommend getting a wellness pack specifically that has multiple stem enhance. Plasma flow is the other one that I recommend you take regularly. Cyactive and cyactive joint, no. You can have it on hand if you have a bout of inflammation that you really cannot handle. But those are more so for acute inflammation support, or not acute inflammation support, but to be used not consistently, because they do have an effect on your COX and LOX enzymes. Specifically, I think your COX enzymes. And you do not want to be interfering with normal function of your physiology for that long. For a very long time, like regularly. You don't want to depend on that. So go and refer to the link at the top right corner of the screen from a little ways back, actually, in this video. But if it's not up there because I already added it earlier, then just refer to the description below and you'll find them so that you can learn more about them. And yeah, so that's what I'll say about that. But anyway, now, finally. There are a lot of morons online. Peter, I don't think is a moron, actually. I don't think he's a moron. He's one of the only ones that I've seen that is actually remotely sensible. But there are plenty that I have reacted to that are absolutely moronic. So, a lot of morons online. And a lot of these morons actually call themselves coaches. I'm sure that you know that. But if you didn't know, the legal requirements to call yourself a coach are calling yourself a coach. That's it. Nothing else. So I can call myself a coach right now, and legally I'm a coach. There you go. Now, don't get me wrong. That is the consequence of having a deregulated or unregulated system. And I'm actually a fan of deregulation because we've seen what regulation actually does. The appeal to authority and all the fraud and the detachment of, the people at the top from the people at the bottom. But that doesn't mean that the system is perfect. Every system has its flaws. I just think this one has the least amount of flaws, or at least the flaws that they do have are the least consequential. And so what that does, though, necessarily, is it means that it makes it incumbent upon us, it behooves us, to increase the supply of coaches that actually know what they're talking about. The people that know what they're talking about in order to help people to the greatest degree possible and drown out that noise. Okay? And unfortunately for you, I have a program that allows you to do exactly that, that I'm affiliated with, that is headed by Carnivore Coach Peter, someone who has coached clients for over 20 years and has decided to take a break to coach coaches. This is a program that is recognized by the National Academy of Sports Medicine and the Athletics and Fitness Association of America that gets you internationally accredited as an internationally certified carnivore coach, and specifically a nutrition and fitness coach if you decide to take the fitness program. But hold on, Eddie, what actually is this program? Okay, that's great. You've now hyped this up. We get internationally accredited, whatever that means. Explain that too, Eddie. What does that mean? Okay, well, I'm glad that you asked. I'm glad that you're telling me to explain it all. This is a program that gets you an education in all things carnivore and all things biochemistry and health that is 100,000 times greater in quality, in my opinion at least, than what you would ever require in university for an incomprehensibly small fraction of the price. Sound good? Okay, keep listening. This is also something that we continue to grow. So we continue to increase the size of it. We continue to implement even more material from it. We've recruited Coach Stephen Thomas for a comprehensive breakdown of proper and accurate interpretation of blood tests. So what blood tests actually measure, how to properly interpret them. You're not going to learn that from university. We've recruited Coach Richard Smith. We've also recruited emergency medical doctor, Dr. Ankur Verma from India, about how to properly interpret medical literature. We also have Dr. Abs in the program, who has talked about the intricate and intimate effects of glucose on your physiology and what damage it can actually cause. Also, the effects of a very, very nifty molecule called NAD positive, which you may have heard of before. I've talked about it in my biochemistry course early access program. as well. But also, of course, yours truly has contributed multiple modules to that program surrounding topics like vitamin C metabolism on carnivore, ketones, gluconeogenesis, uncoupled versus coupled mitochondria. We also have cholesterol, saturated fat, and heart disease, the Randall cycle, the implications of exogenous or dietary carbohydrates in high-intensity training, whether it's ever responsible to reintroduce carbohydrates back into people's diets, and if so, under what circumstances, and who's to say whether that is the final and the most amount that I will ever contribute to the program. Also, you get lifetime access to this program. Also, you get a free consultation service with me face-to-face so that you can talk to me and ask me questions about anything that I've talked about in the program, and also anything that I may not talk about in the program, but I talk about in my public material that I have over 7 days worth of, by the way. Really, after hearing all that, it's a no-brainer. But also, there's still more. Eddie, you still haven't talked about what it means to be internationally accredited. Okay, well, I'll tell you. International accreditation means that you are going to be someone that brings meaning back to the term authority, because as much as it is a fallacy to appeal to authority, it doesn't change the fact that most people are still going to do exactly that. So you may as well make authority mean something. It allows you to speak more intimately and directly with medical professionals of your clientele that you wish to help out. And also it makes it easier for you to acquire insurance. So if you are someone who has had tremendous success on a carnivore diet, and or have seen other people have tremendous successes on a carnivore diet, and or are someone that knows at least some fundamentals about biochemistry and wants to learn more about it so you can help more people, then I think it's your moral obligation to do so in any way that's easiest for you and best for you to do it. Okay, it doesn't mean that this is the best way, but if you're not sure if it is the best way for you or not, well, the best thing to do is to schedule a free call with Peter himself. Yes, a free call with Coach Peter to have a more personalized conversation about this program, to find out more about who Peter is, to find out more about the program than maybe I covered here. And if you want to take a step even before that to learn more about the program and to learn more about who Peter is as a person, I will link at the top right corner of the screen an interview that I had with Peter a few months back where we talk about exactly these things: who Peter is, what led him to carnivore, what his experience has been on carnivore, what his experience has been on coaching people on carnivore. And by the way, spoiler alert, has been very positive. Of course, since that was a few months ago, we've added a lot since then, but still it gives you a general gist of the program still. So with that being said, I hope to see you there. It's a no-brainer. We need more coaches. We need to fight the good fight. We need to build an army, right? Do you want to be a soldier in the army? I think we could use you. So a little bit of sort of an Uncle Sam approach in a way. With that being said, though, join me next time whenever we're reacting to more, well, actually relatively sensible content, but still erroneous conclusion arriving, I guess you could say. Doesn't really roll off the tongue, but anyway, trust me on it. Just trust me. So, till then,